Eleanor Hayes walked into the courtroom holding her two children as if the weight of the world rested on her trembling arms. No one could tell from her pale face that she had once laughed freely or trusted the man now standing across the room. Watching her with cold eyes, her husband Richard Hayes and his mother Margaret entered confidently wearing expressions of control and power. Eleanor stood alone without a lawyer or family support, her two children clinging to her coat, her heart pounded as she recalled the nights she was locked out of her own house, the children crying inside while she shivered in the cold. She remembered the bruises hidden under her sleeves, the constant fear that kept her silent for years, and the threats whispered in the dark telling her no one would ever believe her. She remembered the way Richard would watch her in the kitchen with a smile that never reached his eyes, and how Margaret would stand in the hallway judging every move, making her feel small and powerless. The courtroom felt cold and alien, yet Eleanor felt a fire inside that had been smoldering for years. Her voice shook as she began to speak. At first almost a whisper, then stronger as memories poured out. She told of nights she had hidden in closets, listening to Richard yell at the children for minor mistakes, and how she had once tried to leave, only to be followed to the car and threatened with losing custody of Noah and Ivy. Richard suddenly interrupted, calling her unstable, emotional, unfit. Margaret joined in, claiming mental illness and saying she was dangerous to her children. The judge watched quietly as Eleanor tightened her arms around the children and took a deep breath. She said this was not about divorce. This was about survival. She revealed that 3 weeks ago she had discovered a hidden envelope in Richard's study, a file he never intended her to find, and when she confronted him, he had threatened her, saying she would regret ever opening it. That night she had been locked out in the rain. Her phone had disappeared, and the security cameras inside the house had been removed. The judge asked why she had not gone to the police earlier. Eleanor looked directly at Richard and said because his brother was the chief of police. The courtroom murmured, and Margaret called it defamation. Richard remained silent, but his jaw tightened. The judge ordered silence, and Eleanor continued, saying that 2 days before coming to court, she had received an anonymous message on her old email account, "Check the basement." She explained that the house had no basement, at least none that she had ever been shown, and that there was a hidden door beneath the staircase behind a false wall. Margaret had accused her of lying, and Richard had stopped his mother from speaking. Eleanor said she knew something was behind that door because every night at exactly 2:15, Richard would leave the bedroom and return 40 minutes later, smelling of dust and something metallic, and she had followed him once, peeking down the hallway, and seen him kneeling by the false wall, moving his hands carefully, as if hiding something precious. The judge leaned forward and asked if she had proof. Eleanor looked down at Noah and Ivy and then back at the judge and said, "Yes, what I am about to reveal will change everything." She paused and swallowed hard and then whispered that what was behind that door was not just evidence, it was a secret that could destroy her husband and his family, and that if she failed to prove it, she would lose not only the case, but the safety of her children, and she knew Richard and Margaret would stop at nothing to make sure she never told anyone. The courtroom was silent as Eleanor Hayes gripped her children closer and began to describe the days leading up to the secret she had uncovered. She explained how she had spent weeks watching Richard, carefully taking notes on every move he made, every key he carried, every time he locked himself in rooms that should have been open to her. She spoke of sleepless nights pacing the floor of her small apartment, wondering if she was imagining things, but then she remembered the bruises, the missing money, and the nights her children had cried themselves to sleep. She said she had followed Richard one night after he pretended to go for a late meeting and had seen him enter the hidden door beneath the staircase with a box tucked under his arm, and when he returned, he wiped his hands as if nothing had happened. Eleanor said she did not know what was inside that box, but she had seen metallic edges glinting in the dim light, and she had heard him whisper something that sounded like a name she did not recognize. Her voice trembled as she told the judge how she had realized that the key to the hidden door was on Richard's private keychain, always within reach. and how she had tried to take it once and had been caught and threatened that her children would be taken from her if she ever touched his possessions again. She said she had become desperate and scared and had begun leaving little cameras in the living room, trying to capture what he did, and then she had received the anonymous email telling her to check the basement. She paused as Margaret Hayes whispered to Richard, and he leaned down to smile at her in that way that had haunted her for years, a smile that promised punishment. Eleanor continued, describing the night she had finally decided to act. She said she had waited until Richard left for a dinner party and then sneaked into the house with her coat over her head and the children in a stroller. She had brought a bag with her camera equipment and a flashlight and had crept up the hallway towards the staircase, and then she had seen it. The small hidden door tucked neatly into the wall, a door that had been part of her life for years without her knowing it. She said she had taken the key from Richard's study when no one was looking and had unlocked it, slowly holding her breath as the children slept in the stroller just a few feet away. Eleanor said the door creaked slightly and she saw dust falling from the edges, and then the room beyond opened like a nightmare. She had never imagined there were shelves lined with files, photographs, stacks of documents, and a single small box on the floor that seemed heavier than it should be. She told how she had started to open the box and had found envelopes labeled with dates and names, and some of them with her children's names on them, and her hands had shaken as she realized these were not ordinary documents. These were plans and secrets meant to control her life and her children's lives. She said she had found evidence of transfers of money she never knew existed, phone records she had been denied access to, and photographs showing things she could not explain. Yet she knew they proved everything she said. At that moment, she had heard footsteps behind her and had thrown the envelopes into her bag and run back down the hall, pushing the stroller and holding the children tighter than ever. And that when she reached the front door, she had heard Richard shout from inside, threatening her in ways that made her blood run cold, and she had run into the night. The judge leaned forward, asking for details. Eleanor said she had every piece of evidence in her bag, every photograph, every envelope, every recording of him threatening her, and she was ready to show the court that she was not lying and that the truth would come out, that the hidden room beneath the staircase was proof of everything she had suffered, and that she would not stop until her children were safe and the people who had tormented her for years were held accountable. The courtroom held its breath as Eleanor described opening her bag and showing that the envelopes had handwritten notes matching Richard's handwriting and photographs showing meetings he had lied about and financial transactions she had never been allowed to see, and that even Margaret had no excuse now, and that the judge could see that her story was not fantasy but reality. Eleanor said she had lived in fear for so long that even speaking now felt dangerous, yet she would not be silenced. She would reveal the hidden secrets of the house, the manipulations, the threats, the abuse, the control, and she would make sure the children knew they were never to blame for what had happened, and she would make the world see the truth. Eleanor Hayes stood in the courtroom, her arms still around Noah and Ivy, as she opened the bag and revealed every single envelope, photograph, and recording she had collected over the past weeks. The judge leaned forward and the room fell silent as she began to explain that the documents contained proof of financial manipulation, secret bank accounts opened in her name without her knowledge, evidence of threats and intimidation, and photographs showing Richard and Margaret in situations that exposed the lies they had told for years. She said that the hidden room beneath the staircase was not only evidence of control, but a place where Richard had planned to manipulate and harm their lives further, and that the small box she had found contained letters detailing instructions for her removal from the house and custody plans she would never agree to. Eleanor told how she had confronted Richard after discovering everything and how he had tried to intimidate her into silence, but she had refused and run to the safety of the public eye, and the judge asked if she had shared any of this with anyone before coming to court. And she said no, because she feared for her life and that of her children. The courtroom watched in disbelief as Eleanor described every detail from the hidden room, the files, The photographs, the envelopes, and the recordings, and how each piece proved her story and refuted every claim Richard and Margaret had made against her. She said that she had even recorded conversations where Richard threatened her using his power and family connections to make sure. She stayed silent, and that Margaret had encouraged and witnessed the abuse, and that the evidence was undeniable. Richard tried to stand and shout accusations of fabrication and lying. But the judge called for silence and told him that the evidence would speak for itself. Eleanor then turned toward the judge and said that what she feared most was losing her children because for years she had been made to feel powerless, but now she had proof that she was the one keeping them safe and that the people who had tormented her would be exposed. She said she had no intention of destroying her family, but she demanded justice and protection, and that the children were never to be used as weapons again. The judge carefully reviewed the evidence. Kayla Leaner placed on the table, and the courtroom felt the weight of every secret being revealed. The murmurs grew louder, and Richard looked pale as Margaret clutched her arm, realizing the severity of what had been uncovered. Eleanor took a deep breath and said that the story did not end there, that the files and photographs were only part of the plan, and that her next step would be to ensure the authorities reviewed every document and every recording so that no one could manipulate the truth. Again, the judge nodded and called for Richard and Margaret to leave the room while the children stayed with Eleanor, and said that a protective order and investigation would be immediately enacted. The courtroom emptied except for Eleanor and her children, and the staff as they watched the mother and her little ones finally safe from the threats that had loomed over them for years. Eleanor hugged Noah and Ivy tightly and whispered that they were finally free. And that night she left the courthouse with her children feeling lighter than she had in years, knowing that the hidden door beneath the staircase had revealed more than just secrets. It had revealed courage and survival, and a story of a mother who refused to be silenced, and that the world had finally witnessed the truth.